welcome back to the Smarketing Show. Rick, Christina, Tommy, we're happy to have you guys back. We're in episode 4, Why Thought Leadership. And I was looking over some stats, and one of them I thought that was good was, according to a 2021 study by LinkedIn and Edelman, 54% of B2B decision makers spend more than half an hour a week engaging with thought leadership content. More than half say they spend more time with it than before the pandemic. So that's a really interesting stat. What are your thoughts on that?
Doesn't surprise me. AI is complicated. If it's especially about AI, why wouldn't you want to learn? Why wouldn't you want to hear how other people are talking about it? Because it's kind of like holding a compass in your hand. If your organization doesn't know where to go, thought leadership can really help drive that ship.
Mm-hmm.
And from a sales perspective, Melissa, I don't know if people, maybe we should just set a baseline here. What is thought leadership, right? So if you're watching, you're like, okay, what the heck is thought leadership?
Yeah, I am.
Sorry to pass down here, but hang on to the rope. Thought leadership would be things like if you're one of our Into Communications customers, you may have us place content on your website or through your social media streams or emails, things like, blogs on your website would be thought leadership, newsletters, explainer videos, explaining something that would communicate not so much your value proposition, but explain something to somebody that you don't understand that may serve you well in terms of your sales objectives. Webinars, Melissa, you just hosted one this morning on technology priorities for the year ahead. Very much educational white papers. And Christina, I know you've written a bazillion of them. Don't get into how many trees you've probably assassinated with all your writing. That's ebooks. But I'm just saying they're supporting tools that validate your competency, your credibility. And as a seller, I would argue that they're actually really important when you get into a deal. And our listeners can relate to this. And you're trying to sell to somebody and they go dark on you. Okay. So the typical thing is you follow up and you're like, hey, Christina, any updates on the progress, where we were talking about? And this is where I think, what you've taught me, Tommy and Christina, with the work you guys have done, is these assets are not just for credibility, but they're also could be served in follow up on sales cycles. Like, hey, by the way, here's a white paper I thought was interesting. Here's a video I thought was relevant. So you're actually helping the person buy as opposed to sell them. So I'm probably coming at more of a sales angle, but
well, it makes a lot of sense, Rick. I mean, what you're talking about is on point. What you do is thought leadership. And when I was mentioning holding a compass in your hand, I was quite intentional about that, because whenever you have an organization that's trying to head in a certain direction and there's a bit of confusion about how to step forward, thought leadership is what generates alignment. It's what generates conversation. It generates interest. It can even generate debate. And that can be really healthy for figuring out what the temperature is on something before you move forward. So when I think about thought leadership, I really think about shaping perception. I really think about facilitating conversation and building trust in an organization when they're not quite sure how to move forward, or you just need that extra little push to keep the ship moving forward in the right direction.
Christina, I've got some questions here. What are some examples or formats and types of thought leadership out there? Maybe
Sure. So one example could be an article providing insights, a new development in the industry, or an audio podcast or video presentation, webinar, whatever, clarifying a strategy or practice in the industry. Another example could be an interview where to discuss the takeaways from a key publication.
Okay.
Perhaps it's an ebook that has been created that showcases the author's insights, or even a LinkedIn post that links to further insights. All of those are just examples of various thought leadership products.
Okay, awesome.
That interview thing is drastically underutilized. I'm glad you brought it up, because we have a lot of people that want to communicate a message, but they don't understand really what to say. And there's a lot of times with subject matter experts, and we would call on you two, for example, to interface with one of our customers about an AI policy. I can explain it to a certain point, but I certainly don't have the experience nor breadth of knowledge. So you guys would be great to interview and say, hey, well, kind of what we're doing right now on this podcast, to be honest. I think that's underestimated, most of the interview.
I would totally agree.
And just as a point, Christine, I'm glad you brought that up, because I kind of like LinkedIn. The We had a guy on LinkedIn from LinkedIn come in and speak at one of my events. We had about 100 and something salespeople there, and this is pre-COVID. And he showed a stat on the wall, and it said 49% of B2B buyers will look at the seller's LinkedIn profile as part of their buying evaluation. Now, that's pre-COVID. I would argue that number now is over, 49%.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, is another vehicle that I think is drastically underutilized. And people that are on there, we coach obviously reps on LinkedIn, but the biggest mistake we see is they put so much promotional content versus educational content. And anyway, it's just an opportunity, I think, to separate yourself, like your personal brand and your company. But it doesn't matter what piece. We're talking about different pieces, but they all need to kind of wear the same jersey at some point, I think, and be used strategically, like chess pieces. Okay, we'll use the horse now, the rook here. But it's not one piece, I think, in short. And I think a lot of people get too caught up in like, oh, we got that one thing. And some people like different flavors of ice cream. They may want different flavors of, content.
Absolutely.
100%.
It's important to diversify and, show different aspects of your thought leadership work.
There is so much content on social media. And if you're looking on social media for people who have ideas or responses to things that are trending, like a new AI bill that came out in California 3 weeks ago, and you thought you heard about it when you're flipping through your phone's headlines a couple days ago, but you never took the time to read it. If you listen for a minute, you're going to learn something that could be really, really insightful. So thought leadership's everywhere. When we talk about content in blogs and in newsletters and in podcasts and videocasts like this, that's what we're talking about. But people are consuming thought leadership every day, all the time, every time they get in their computer or their phone. So the idea is to be intentional about where you're going and what you're consuming in order to enhance how much knowledge you have about an issue that you might not know so much about.
And given our vibe on AI, which we've been talking about, I think some people are going to turn to our favorite one. We'll call it ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Go there for thought leadership. And yet, one thing I think people miss is right on the dashboard of ChatGPT. It says right under the field where you put in your prompt, like ChatGPT makes mistakes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this. Would we get into a car? Okay, let's say they got these self-driving cars. Would we get into a self-driving car that says right on the outside, this self-driving vehicle makes mistakes? Like, be prepared for what's going to happen. Or you're going to eat something and say, this food may not be ideal for you. Cigarettes. People still smoke, sorry, but
Zinger.
Rick, we were reading not all that long ago about a story that came out, I think it was earlier this year, Christina. Everyone seemed to talk about it, whether you're a lawyer or not. But this poor lawyer had gone into court in British Columbia in Canada, and he had cited a bunch of cases, historical cases, to help prove a point while he was litigating. And it turned out that all of those cases were hallucinated. They weren't real. And he got caught and almost lost his license over it. So, Rick, your point's really, really important. We can use ChatGPT to help generate ideas all of the time. And most of the time, they're quite good if you know how to engage with the tool. But again, to your point, Rick, I think the thing that people often forget is that natural language processors model the world. They don't reflect it in reality. It's founded upon massive databases that are essentially measurements of a world that it is interacting with, but it's not interacting with the real world. It's modeled historical data. And so you're going to catch natural language processors making mistakes. And that's why it's really, really important to continue talking to people and experts as well about how to use the thing in a successful and safe way. That's my opinion anyhow.
Let me ask you guys a question that someone may ask. Okay, Christina or Tommy. I'm in the finance industry. I'm in insurance. Maybe I'm in healthcare. I'm an HR leader. I'm a lawyer that isn't as up to speed as you two, let's say on, AI and compliant, like legislation and efficacy and all those good things. Why would someone not, and maybe explain it in basic terms if you can, why should someone come to someone like you, or even us for our expertise, Melissa? Let's go off, and I know you just maybe answered it, but go off on this ChatGPT and whip something together, or get someone who kind of understands it, but they're 30,000 feet and they can't dig down into specifics. You know what I mean? Like there's good content that is thought leadership, and then there's stuff that I would call is damaging content.
Well, thought leadership, these people that are thought leaders, they have expertise. And that is not just, searching the internet and coming up with a short answer from a chatbot. Like, that's not the same kind of a thing. Like, years and years of profound education and experience in this area, and really understanding the human aspects of the topic. This is not something that a chatbot can do. It's not exactly the same as what thought leaders do.
It's a great response, Christina. Like, I really value the emphasis on like the historical training educational process of becoming an expert. So I have this friend that I want to tell you guys about, and I want to share with our listeners. He's a full professor at a university in Canada, and I remember when I was training with him, and I had asked him, after marveling after this public talk that he gave, how do you know so much? Like, that's absolutely crazy to me that you can be so specific about whatever the issue was, politics at the border or something like that. And he said, well, Tom, I didn't get my PhD in a Cracker Jack box. And I really thought about that for years. And then when Christine and I went and did our PhDs, what we had realized is that what makes it difficult is that you're studying how other people think and how they test and validate their knowledge. There are so many hurdles, there are so many obstacles, and so many tests that you have to go through as an expert in order to make sure that what you're claiming to be valid and true is actually valid and true. There are so many people that you have to make sure understand what you're saying and verify for you that you're correct, that at the end of the day, we don't get away with just saying whatever we want. We have to make sure that it's accurate. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in. And that's something that is a very big difference between us and talking to ChatGPT.
Great explanation.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to change my saying now. I used to say age and treachery will always outdo youth and skill. Now I'm going to change it to age and treachery will always outdo youth and AI. How about that one?
I thought you were going to tie in the Cracker Jack.
The risk
Can
of
you trademark that, please?
Yeah.
I don't think people put enough value on their, on watered down content. Like these buyers now that we're dealing with, they're digital, they're perimeter players, they're peripheral. They'll do a digital scope discovery. We don't need to get into all the latest stats on what percent Google and all that stuff. But if you've got B content and then you go to another organization that's got A content, you can tell pretty quickly who knows what they're talking about, like very quickly.
Yeah.
Rick, I think we've had this really wonderful encounter as Voyage Strategy recently. So I wanted to share with you guys this experience. We've been working with a large professional association, and they have tens of thousands of members. And one of the things that they identified as one of their primary concerns was specifically thought leadership in artificial intelligence. And what we'd also realized is that the membership have ethical and legal stakes in making sure that they're guiding the people that they work with, their colleagues, as safely and as successfully as possible. Right? And so it's really, really important for this organization to make sure that they're demonstrating to their members that they understand the opportunities and the pitfalls together when it comes to AI, because everyone in their membership is talking about it. Everyone's having a conversation, and those conversations are heavy. They can be light, they can be really promising, and they can be really frightful. So this organization is thinking, what is going to help them feel confident about not only addressing AI issues in their respective workplaces, but how to bring it in and use it successfully, and particularly in a way that is going to make people feel reassured. So I think it's really, really important that when you're working with people that are developing your thought leadership, people like Christina, for example, who have incredible depth and experience in the law of employment, for example, that they're able to be very precise and articulate about where the opportunities are and where they aren't.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really your tandem. I see the power of your tandem as Christina understands the legal side. You're deeper than most would ever want to go deep with you on technology. And like at a global level, and like, I know you've done some very high-end assignments, we'll call it the least government, you've taught all that stuff. But Sorry, one of the things we were talking about too is how, is engagement a barometer, right, of this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what you guys think about that. What do you guys think? Like, as far as engagement as a barometer of what really? The quality, the visibility?
I think it's a great point, Rick. I think when you're thinking about engagement as a barometer, the idea is to sort of take the temperature of what's going on in your organization. What are people talking about? How are they talking about it? Are the conversations consistent? Are you a part of them? If there's somebody in your organization that is excited about AI and you have someone beside them that isn't, and they're having a conversation, if you're not part of that conversation, it is very, very difficult for any organization to move forward because that conversation stays in a silo.
Hmm.
And if you're a leader in your organization, if you fancy yourself somebody that likes to be a thought leader to push through particular roadblocks or obstacles, you need to get those people in a room and talk about what really makes sense. If we are going to settle this debate on whether or not AI is going to work for us, let's invite more people to the conversation. Let's get more business line leaders together. Let's get executives involved, and let's see what we can actually make with this. I think being able to act and not just hesitate and get involved in those conversations is part of what you get when you have that barometer, Rick.
So how do you guys come up with your thought leadership content ideas, if I may ask? Like for us, we spearhead a lot of it based on responses to questions that we think the stakeholders are asking. Okay. And that serves us well from a Google search perspective and also makes it educational as opposed to promotional. But I don't know if you guys have a different strategy because this, one of the things that we may not have mentioned in the series we're doing is I believe that ChatGPT is going to challenge, rival, replace Google in terms of a search engine in the very foreseeable future. I mean, and what do you guys think of that, by the way? Am I off on that? You know more than I do on this topic, but that's my layman. Like, I'm starting to do searches on ChatGPT that I used to do on Google, and it's given me quicker. I got to check it. Human in the loop. Thanks for coaching me on that.
That's his favorite line now.
But I guess where I was going was, how do you guys come up with your ideas for thought leadership content? Like, how do you guys, because you guys serve people with creating thought leadership content. So how do you guys go about coming up with it? Because people may not know how to come up with it as basic as that sounds. They don't know what they don't know sometimes.
I can tell you what I do. I read more than I write. I read for hours every day.
How is that possible that you read more than you write?
It's possible. Like not just like legislative, like all the legislatures in every province or every state. I also read like I do Gmail alerts and I get keywords like AI policy, AI ethics, like all sorts of things that are important for this area. And it scours the internet and you get results every day. So I read all those stories too. So I read a lot more than I could possibly write. I have a few pages of lists of ideas for articles and things that I want to do, but it's important to know what's happening so you can prioritize and say, okay, this is really urgent right now. This just happened, but it's so important. I have to talk about it now. So everything else has to wait, and that's what I'm doing. That's what I do. How about you, Tom?
It makes a lot of sense coming from Christina too, because
Absolutely.
she happens to be our chief publisher at our company.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So something that we do every week is we publish. We publish free insights that we share on our website that are effectively pieces of thought leadership. And I was thinking about the way Christina does she has this amazing ability to scan the world and scan issues that are emerging and news in particular to find out what to talk about. But something else that Christina is also really good at, is something that I've really valued as being a consultant for so long, is thinking about people, processes, and practices in organizations. Technology is always in between or touching one of those things. And so when we see a headline come out, for example, or we know that there's been a really intense academic debate around a particular AI model that has something to do with the law or ethics or politics or what have you, we think about people, processes, and practices in organizations to see how those things relate. And they do. And that's something that we spent a lot of time learning how to do when we were going through grad school. So it's something that we actually really, really enjoy. It's a lot of fun for us, as weird as that sounds.
But again, I'm going to triple down. Like, I think business leaders, they underestimate how many people are looking at them through a digital lens and the content they provide. I'll give you a reverse example. We had a lot of people in marketing, they measure vanity metrics, we'll call it, okay? Impressions, likes, shares, all that jazz, good stuff. It's all good, right? Comments. We made an error on a social post, okay? Because we're not perfect. And the activity on the post, in this case, was on LinkedIn, was low in comparison to the emails this guy got from his buddies, his employees, his customers saying, "Hey, this isn't right. This isn't whatever you guys do." My point is that sometimes it's difficult to understand who's looking at you or your content, and in this case, only because we made a mistake was he awakened to the exponential amount of people that are actually evaluating his business based on what he's showing on, in this case, LinkedIn. And the other thing we find too is that the thought leadership content, it's often got, it's not always evergreen, but it has a long life cycle. And if you do it right with people understand what they're doing, you can not date stuff maybe, or you can, frame it so it has a longer life cycle, but some of it needs to be tended to right away. But anyway, it was just an interesting, because this is someone that was doubting thought leadership, that because we made an error, now said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe all these people are watching the movie." That, it's interesting for me.
One of the questions I have is, how do you know that you're doing enough, Tommy, like as an organization?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's a series of questions that you could ask yourself, and I think we've touched on a few of them already, Melissa. But I want to circle back to something I said earlier about making sure that you're the one that is showing up regularly in conversations about AI, wherever those things are happening, wherever those conversations are taking place. I think you want to be involved in them. And to also mention the point that Rick had just made about not, potentially making mistakes along the way. We're all human.
Right.
AI is very, very, very complicated, and leaders don't always have answers. In fact, the best leaders that I've encountered, no, they don't have many answers, but they can find them. They can find the people that have the expertise. So I think the next thing that you want to be asking yourself is, if you don't have the answers, how are you going to find them? This is another really important question that you can be asking yourself. And I think the last one that I think might be a little bit down the road for some people when they're thinking about thought leadership around AI is, are you able to translate the efforts that you're investing into, like AI thought leadership into real world outcomes? If you're having conversations and you're disseminating content to your workforce to generate alignment, or maybe to your clients about a new product they're not entirely sure about because it's AI based or AI driven, are you able to measure the impact? Are you able to measure the excitement or the fear in an organization? What do your KPIs look like around these kinds of things? And I think once you're able to measure the engagement, just like we do in social media when we post a blog or a newsletter article or link or something, you're going to be able to understand whether or not you are doing enough. So I think if you follow those questions, it should really help.
Okay, great.
Tommy just said, I don't think enough organizations do internal thought leadership, by the way.
Yeah,
I think
it's
of
a
it
good
externally.
point.
You bring that up. Like, I don't think, Melissa, the clients we work with, a lot of them may see the leader, so-called leaders, once a quarter, once a half, maybe a couple times. Like, I think that's a missed thing for a lot of companies, just by you bringing that up.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
what is internal thought leadership? It could be like, what would be an example, Tommy, of internal thought leadership versus external to a customer profile? Like, what would you do internally?
Let's be hypothetical. Let's say you have a scenario where you have hundreds of employees and they work in very different parts of the company and often don't talk to one another. They're all going to have assumptions and ideas about AI within the context where they live and they play, right? So if they're salespeople, they think about and they conceptualize AI very, very differently than your HR people or your legal people, right? Or your finance people. And so they're all having these conversations and excitements and fears all at the same time. And because they're all different, it's a little bit of a problem in order for an organization to move forward on figuring out what AI they should invest in, how to bring it in, how do you fine tune the thing, and how do you wrap it with the proper guardrails. And so in order to properly step forward in your engagement with AI, sometimes it can be really important to start circulating content in a newsletter or an intranet post or something like that that says, we hear you. Here's a survey. Share some of your thoughts, and then follow up after that survey with playing back what you learned and what you heard. Then start sharing your thought leadership. Because it shows that you're listening, it shows that you care, and it shows that you're sharing direction to help quell some of those differences and build similarity and commonality across all the different business lines.
Hey, as we wrap up today, are there any final thoughts from you, Christina, Tommy, Rick?
I can go. Thought leadership is about establishing your expertise and experience and building your brand.
Excellent.
Hey, you sound like a marketer. Okay, so Melissa, I would say thought leadership is drastically underestimated. If we think about the percentage of workers today that are Gen Zs and millennials that don't want to talk to anybody in any way, if we don't think they're doing a digital scope of your business, I think you're drastically underestimating it. Secondly, again, for you sales leaders listening, think about your reps that are following up on prospects that have gone dark. Are they following up saying, hey, annoyingly, any news, any updates, etc.? Versus what we see the elite ones do is say, hey, by the way, I know you're probably still processing this. Here's a link to insert thought leadership content here, interview, video, white paper, etc. I think the seller today that helps the buyer buy is going to win over the seller that doesn't have the thought leadership content in the company and then brings it into their sales cycles.
Absolutely. Tommy, any final words from you?
There's no way I can follow up on those wonderful responses.
Let's just go with we agree.
Very succinct. Okay, so I'll leave one out there anyways. You're thinking about thought leadership because you're navigating something. You can't navigate without a compass. That's what thought leadership is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's something that you can hold up to the people that you work with and the people that are invested in your organization and what you're doing to show here's some direction. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was fun. Very insightful. Thank you. And we'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.